Hello friends, welcome to Storytime with Teacher Julian. Today's book is about trees. That's what we've been studying. So I have a question before we get started. Who takes care of trees? So you see a tree out there standing like that. Who takes care of it? What if it gets sick? What if its branches get too big? So this book today, Growing Trees, we're going to see if it answers that question. Who takes care of trees? Growing Trees. It was written by Judith Bauer Stamper and illustrated by Wesley Lowe. There she is. Growing Trees. This is a picture of my tree and me. We've been growing up together for a whole year. It all began last summer. I went to visit a national forest with my mom and dad. A forest is a great place to learn about trees. There are trees as far as you can see. Now it says she went to a national forest. And a national forest is a woodland area owned by American people, like you and me. It's a place to go see trees and wildlife. We took a hike with a forester, an expert on taking care of trees in the wild. The forester showed us small, young trees and big, old trees that were like towering giants. Can you see the forester? Yep, that's right. Right there. A forester is someone that uses science to manage trees in national forests. And some private forests too. Then he explained the life cycle of a tree. It all starts out with a seed. In the spring, the warm sun makes the seed germinate or begin to grow. The seed sprouts on a small root that grows down into the ground. The root absorbs the water and the minerals from the soil. There's the seed. And at first, it doesn't go up, it goes down. And see the root down there? That's where it can get all the water and nutrients or food that it needs. And then look, the root, and then it starts sprouting a stem. Next, a small stem pushes up out of the ground and grows two tiny seed leaves. The leaves use sunlight to give the tree energy to grow. A new growth, called a shoot, appears at the tip of the stem. Larger leaves grow from the shoot. The seedling is on its way to becoming a tree. See, as they start growing up, first little small leaves, and then big leaves start coming. And look how the roots are growing. Do you see a difference between when they're tiny like this and what happens? That looks ginormous. The young tree keeps growing if it gets enough water and sunlight to survive. In its next year of life, the tree grows buds that may turn into leaves. Soon the tree has branches, a woody trunk, bark, and lots of leaves. little skinny pole right here, that's the trunk. And then the outside of it is the bark, branches, and leaves. Each year, the tree grows taller and its trunk gets wider. A forester can tell how old a tree is by counting its rings. A tree trunk has one ring for each year it has been alive. This tree was more than 100 years old. A forester can also find out how old a living tree is by using a tree borer, a tool that takes out a small part of the tree without hurting it. See right here? They stick that in there and you can see how many rings. They can count them to see how old the tree is and how healthy it is. And our friend the forester, he went to school to learn how to do that. After our trip to the forest, I wanted to grow a tree of my own. Dad took me to the nursery where you can buy flowers, shrubs, and trees. That is a lot. A nursery has trees that have grown big enough to transplant or plant in a new place. The nursery worker shows me trees that have flowers in the spring and fruit in the summer. We looked at trees with soft leaves and trees with pine needles. So this is a person that works at a nursery. What is she doing? That's right, she's using the garden hose to give water to the trees and all the different plants there. So a nursery worker is a person who works outside with all these different trees and plants, and they water them, they take care of them. Sometimes they trim off little pieces of it. It's called pruning. They do that for all the trees and the plants. It's a nursery worker. I chose a maple tree. The tree was already more than 4 feet high, just a little bit taller than me. What do you think? Is that a good choice? Yeah, I think so too. The nursery worker helped us choose a shovel to plant the trees. She recommended organic fertilizer to feed the tree as it grew. Then she went over the instructions on how to plant my tree. The nursery worker knows a lot about transplanting plants, so gave her some good advice. I picked out a place in our backyard where the tree would have lots of sunlight and lots of room to grow. Then Dad and I dug a hole with the shovel. The hole was as deep as the tree's root ball and about 3 times as wide. That means it must be a pretty big hole. We carefully lowered the tree into the hole. We loosened the burlap bag around the roots. Next, we filled in the soil around the tree. I added organic fertilizer to the soil and sprinkled mulch on top. Then I gave my tree a nice drink of water. Dad asked an arborist to check the other trees in our yard. An arborist is like a doctor for trees. She prunes the branches on our big trees with pruning shears. These right here are pruning shears. See the little tip on them? It chops off the little pieces of the branch. She checked all the trees for signs of disease. She also listened for bugs by using her stethoscope. She looked like a doctor. One of our oldest trees had been damaged in a storm. The arborist used a handsaw and a chainsaw to cut off 2 broken limbs. Does she look like a doctor to you? She's using her stethoscope. I asked the arborist to check my tree. She said it was doing just fine. She added a stake to help it grow up straight. These 2 little sticks right here, those are stakes. And see how it has a little string right here? It helps the tree stand up, grow up straight. So if it's windy, it'll help it when it's young. When the weather turned cold, my tree's green leaves turned bright red. Then they twirled down to the ground. Some trees, when it's changing season, they change from green to red or maybe yellow or orange, and then they fall off the tree. The next spring, my tree grew buds that turned into leaves. Over the summer, it grew branches with more leaves. Its trunk grew thicker. See these little things? These are buds. This is a close-up of a red maple branch with buds on in the spring. There you go. Have you ever seen that before on a tree? This is a leaf from my red maple tree. It has 3 lobes that have saw-tooth edges. The bark is dark gray and rough with little ridges. There's the leaf, the stem, and the lobe. And here is the tree trunk or branch with the ridges and the bark. Bark is on the outside of the tree. All summer, I watered my tree and checked it for insects. It just kept growing. The arborist said that my tree could grow 60 feet high. That's taller than my house. It's getting bigger. Look at my tree now. It's much taller than I am. If I take good care of it, it will be around for a long, long time. A tree is a great friend to grow up with. You can plant a tree too. Which tree would you choose? Now let's see. This one says oak. This is a palm tree, pine tree, a weeping willow, Japanese maple, and a sweet cherry. Which one would you choose? Growing trees. Here's the back of the book and the life cycle of this from seed up to growing up to be a tree. So I had asked a question when we very first got started, and it was about, did this book tell us anything about the people who take care of trees? Well, what do you think? Yes, it talked about the remember his name? Right, that's the forester, and he uses a borer to see how old the tree is. That's a tool he uses. What about this person. Do you remember what she does? That's right, she's a nursery worker. And what about a tool that she might use? Well, here's a little hint. She might use one of these. It's a shovel to dig up and transplant, but she also uses, I know people have this at their house, water hose. You probably have one of these somewhere around where you live. Maybe a neighbor has one. They water all the plants and take care of them. If you don't have this, what else could you use? Or what else could she use to water the plants? Perhaps a bucket of water? Take her a little time, but yeah, that would work. And then lastly, what about... Where is it? There she is. This one starts with an A, an R. Arborist. Remember, she looks like a doctor because she uses a stethoscope to listen for bugs. And she uses these things right here, pruning shears, to cut off small branches. It also says here in another part of the book that she uses a saw to cut off broken limbs, which are bigger branches. These are tiny branches, and maybe a bigger branch like this, she uses a saw. So, yes indeed, this book did answer some questions. Who takes care of trees? Foresters, arborists, and nursery workers. Very good, friends. I hope you enjoyed this book. Gave you a little bit of knowledge on who takes care of trees. I will see you again, friends. Goodbye.